Okay, so we want to start Adobe Premiere, new project, and get going with editing. So the first thing we need to do is figure out how Premiere works and what it's going to be expecting of us. So you need to start with your hard drive first. Right here, I've got my little drive that's called Maxwell, and I open it up, and I've got a folder inside mine called AI. Yours can be just straight in the root of the folder, which would mean it's not in another folder. All my work is going to be done inside the AI folder of my hard drive. So notice that I have absolutely nothing there. A good place to start with this editing process is to have a good, clean structure so that you know where all the files are going to go. With a nonlinear editing system, there's going to be media files that are the actual video. You'll also have still images and sound files and graphics and things like that. And you're going to have project files which have all of your editing decisions in them, your bins, and all of that stuff. So you want to keep this stuff straight and know where everything is going to be for each project. So what I recommend doing is making a new folder inside here called projects. This helps keep everything sorted. And then inside of each project, you're going to make a new folder for each project that you begin. So since our first project is a still story, I'm going to call it Still Story Maxwell. So if you look at the way that this pans out, I've got my AI folder, which has a projects folder inside of it, which then has a folder for still story. I'm going to go ahead and make a new folder because I know that we're going to do a music video. And I'm going to spell it correctly because I am a professional. And I can do that for each and every one of my projects already. I could go ahead and make a folder for each one of those, knowing that that's where my files are going to live. So we're going to work in the Still Story Maxwell for our first project, but we've already got that set up so we don't have to worry about it once we get Premiere started. So it's very important that you already have a projects folder on your hard drive, and for each project that you work on, each project that you edit, you're going to have a new folder that's specifically for that. Because what Adobe does with Premiere is they save all of the project files in a single place. You can split them up if you want to, but given the nature of our laptops and the hard drive that you're going to be using to keep all your projects on, it's a good idea to keep everything in a very portable state. So this is how we're going to do this. We're going to keep it all contained in one folder, so it's very easy to move back and forth between different computers when you're working on a project. So that's all you need to do with your hard drive at the beginning, and then we can actually launch Adobe Premiere. So the best way to do this is actually to move the screen over. And we're going to use the spotlight tool, this little magnifying glass, and I'm going to type Premiere. And the first hit that comes up is Adobe Premiere Pro CS6. The same thing should be true on our computers at school. And I'm going to run the application, making sure that it's not some other Premiere thing, but an actual program. So I'm going to click that, and it will come up. Now my screen is a little bit smaller than the actual window is, so I'll be moving things around a little bit so that you can see everything. Maybe I'll resize it down, I don't know. Who knows what I'll do. But the important thing is to see what happens first. And Premiere is going to pop up a window asking you what you want to do. It's like, hey, I'm starting up. Just wanted to check in with you, see what was happening. Do you want to open a project that you've already done before? Here's some of the recent ones that you've been working on if you want to return to those. Or do you want to start something new? Yeah, kind of get in and be fresh and funky. So yeah, we're obviously going to start a new project. So you'll click on New Project, obviously, and you will get this window that asks you a whole bunch of questions that you probably don't know the answer to yet. It's asking for general information about your project, and then there's a tab for scratch disks, which sounds technical and terrible, but is actually not a big problem. So, general tab here, we need to know what we're working with. The only thing here that really matters is where it's going to save the project and what the capture format is going to be. Now, for our still story, it doesn't matter. We're not going to actually be capturing video from tape or any other video device, but in our future projects, we will be using the DV format to capture with, so we will be using DV instead of HDV. You only have two options. It looks at your computer, it knows what kind of capture connections you've got. It only sees DV on this computer, so it's like, okay, those are your two choices. We won't be using HDV in this course, we will be using DV. So for this project, you can leave it alone. For future projects where you're capturing from tape, you will select DV. Now, underneath here it says, where's the location? Where are you going to save this project? This is important because you need to keep everything on your hard drive and not on your local machine because you may end up with a different computer at another time. So we're going to click the Browse button to change this. This is saving wherever the last place was that somebody saved something. So you obviously don't want to do that. So I'm going to click Browse. And I'm going to look over at the side where my devices are, which means all the plugged in hard drives. And I'm going to go to mine called Maxwell. Now inside of Maxwell, I've got my AI folder. That's great. Double click on that. That opens my projects folder. Okay, we're getting there. Inside my projects folder, when I double click on it, I have my music video and my still story. Now remember, we're working on still stories, so we want to keep all of the project stuff in that project. If you start getting project files mixed up between different projects, you can run into some problems. So do be careful with this stuff. And remember that cleanliness is next to somethingness. We're going to double click on still story Maxwell. Now we have an empty folder. So this is where our project is going to be saved. The project file that contains all of your edits and all of your bins and all your timelines and all of that stuff is saved in one project file, and it's going to go right here. So I'm going to click choose. It lets you choose a folder, and it's going to make its own files in there. And it's going to ask you the name. I'm going to go ahead and call this still story Maxwell. Very important, keep your files named with your names on it so that if they get mixed up when you're copying and backing things up to different hard drives and such, that you can easily identify them. Now you could go ahead and click on OK here, but we're not quite done. This other tab here that I mentioned, the scratch disks, which is sounds like something you don't want to happen to your CD collection. Do people still have CD collections? Is very important when it comes to how is the computer going to look for the temporary files and the video capture files that it's using. So what's nice is that it defaults to the same folder as your project for captured video, for anything that you're going to get off of a camera or tape, for captured audio that you're going to record off of a camera or tape or from a microphone, video previews and audio previews, which are temporary files. So the nice thing here is that it automatically sets it up for you to use that same folder that you've been working in. This is different than some other editing systems, and you don't always want to do it this way when you have your own editing setup, but when you're working with the school equipment and you're going to be swapping out between different laptops and lab computers and all that stuff, you want to keep everything portable, which means keeping everything in one central location. So all of these types of files are going to go into the same folder with your project file. So that looks okay to me. I think that's totally fine. The other drop down is that you can make a custom location for them, or you can put them in your documents folder, which you do not want to do. Just leave it same as project and you'll be A-okay, all right? So the moral of the story is leave the scratch disks, just make sure that it says same as project and everything will be fine. Okay, so we've got the location. It's going to save it in my drive under AI projects under the folder called Still Story Maxwell. The name of the project is going to be Still Story Maxwell, and I'm going to click OK because I think that's okay. Oh! We're not done yet. It wants to know what kind of sequence we're going to be working with. So it automatically sets up a sequence. A sequence is a piece of a project. Projects can contain multiple sequences. A sequence is where you put all the clips together in a certain order. That's where you do the editing part of editing. So it wants to know, what are we working on? Is this coming off of, some sort of film camera? Is it DVC Pro camera? Is it the Red camera? What type of footage are we working on is what it wants to know, so that it can play back that footage in your sequence correctly. We have a couple of different options with ours. Primarily, we're going to be working in DV NTSC. NTSC is an acronym that has been used by the United States and a couple of other places for their particular flavor of the DV format. So get familiar with that, DV NTSC. And you have a couple of different options here. Basically, there's two different audio options, 32 and 48 kilohertz. You're not going to need to know the difference between those because we're always going to use 48 kilohertz. 32 kilohertz is terrible and wrong, and I don't know why it even exists. So we'll always be working with 48 kilohertz. Our options that you're going to run across are going to be the difference between standard, which is 4:3 square, or widescreen, which is a 16:9 aspect ratio. I'm going to go ahead and work with widescreen in this option, even though I'm not even capturing from DV in this project, because that's what we'll be using for all of our future projects as well. So I'm going to choose the widescreen 48 kilohertz preset, and it sets all of these other settings for us. Oh, 29.97, 720 by 480, pixel aspect ratio 1.2121, all this terrible stuff that sounds horrible and complicated. You won't have to set those manually if you choose the correct preset, which is, to reiterate, DV NTSC widescreen 48 kilohertz. So have fun with that. We're going to click OK. But before we do that, we have the option to give this sequence a name. It defaults to sequence 01. That's fine, but let's be a little bit more professional about it. We don't want to have a bunch of random default names. So I'm going to call this still story underscore 01. There we go. So we have consistency throughout our whole project. We don't have anything that's sort of named the defaults and will look like everybody else who ever started up a project. We're going to be consistent. We're going to be professional, right? Okay, so we've made all these settings. Again, DVNTSC, widescreen, 48 kilohertz, still story 01, click OK. And now, if we're lucky, we get to see the Premiere interface. And we'll cover that in another video because this one has done got long. So, just feast your eyes on that for a moment and think about all the fun that we're going to have. And definitely go back and rewatch this tutorial if everything went over your head or if I went too quick. And if not, then feel free to move on to the interface in the future.